And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning here at KIDO Talk Radio. Today's Code 1 Kevin Miller cash code is WATCH. WATCH, WATCH. That's right. Write that down, type it in, go to KIDOTalkRadio.com. The more words you get, well, the better your chances are to win Kevin Miller's cash on KIDO Talk Radio. Listen for Code 2 during the 8:05 hour of my show, and Code 3 will be at 3:05 during the award-winning Sean Hannity show. Coming up, we're going to hear from our friend Heidi Harris. Had a chance to catch up with her earlier. In addition to that, we do want to tell you tomorrow we're going to be at Mountain View High School, thanks to CapEd, Team Mazda Subaru, promoting our schools, securing our future, right here at KIDO Talk Radio. Joining us now, best-selling author, talk show host, media maven. Heidi Harris joining us, author of Don't Pat Me on the Head, Blowback, Setbacks, and Comebacks in Vegas Radio. Heidi, good to have you with us.
Always great to be with you. How are you?
Well, wonderful. So let's take a look at the state of media today. And for people that aren't familiar with your work, tell us a little bit about yourself and your history in media.
Well, I grew up in Las Vegas, and to make it very short, I started doing talk radio in 1999 for free in the middle of the night. And I went on to do radio, talk radio, commercial talk radio for 19 years. And I got bounced out a couple of months ago because I said something online that ticked off the wrong people. It wasn't anything illegal or immoral. I've never been sued in 19 years on the air. But I said something that ticked off a certain group of people. They got upset, and they demanded my head on a stick, and management backed up and basically collapsed like cheap tents.
Boy, that's a heck of a way to earn a living. Why talk radio? And are you finished with the format, or are you coming back?
Well, I'm doing currently a podcast, and I'm doing some other stuff regarding my book. I'm doing a lot of speaking and things like that. And I plan to do more speaking with regard to the book because of the fact that when I started writing this book, obviously I didn't know I was going to be fired, and I didn't know why I was going to be fired. So I had to add a chapter. By the way, the chapter title is Out Like a Bag of Trash. And the interesting thing is I worked on this book for over a year. And when I first started writing it, I actually put in there, well, by the time you read this, I could be out like a bag of trash. So then by the time I was almost finished is when I was fired. So I added that chapter. And so it's completely changed what I thought I would do and the way I thought I would do it. And so now I'm doing a lot of speaking in churches and in groups like that and kind of encouraging people to stand up for what's right, because the reason we're losing the culture war, and I say this as a social conservative, is because we Christians are just backing up. We know what's right, we know what's wrong, but we're easily cowed by people who threaten us, and they're upset. And so what? We need to stand up to them, and we don't. There's a particular quote in my book where I mention a person who emailed me, and he said, well, I shouldn't have to suffer hatred and bigotry because of who I love. And I said, yes, you should. I said, you're not entitled to a world where everybody salutes everything you do. I mean, think about it, Kevin. Even if you're a straight person, you walk out of your house every day, somebody's going to have an opinion about what you weigh, what you wear, what you listen to, what you drive, who you date, gay or straight. People are going to have an opinion, and nobody's entitled to a world where everybody agrees with everything Kevin Miller does. And that's the point that I tried to make to this little snowflake.
Heidi Harris joining us, author of Don't Pat Me on the Head. How do we get your book, by the way?
Amazon.com, Don't Pat Me on the Head. And if you forget all that, HeidiHarris.com. There's a link up there, HeidiHarris.com. But yeah, and it's funny because I don't remember actually how I came up with the title, but I think women get this more than men. It's not a woman's book, but women go, yes, I know what you mean when you say don't pat me on the head. And I'm sure men can relate to that too, but especially women who, you know, you can cuss at me all you want, but do not be condescending. And that's the reason for the title in the book, because I've had a couple incidents over the course of my radio career where people have done just that to me, and it makes me crazy. I don't mind if you yell at me, but don't do that. And it's not a tell-all book. I don't bash anybody in the book. It's not a whiny book. I don't complain about stuff I've been through. I hope that when people read it, they're encouraged by how to survive, how I survived certain things that happened, and I hope that they're encouraged to survive things that happen to them. I also talk in the book, it's got a little inside radio, so if you like talk radio, even if you don't like me, you might like the fact that I talk about how I pick topics and callers and guests, and I have some great backstories of things that happened, like the dog that ate the entire chair in the studio while I was on the air, the rescue dog, and things like that, how to survive coaching changes we've all been through that where on Friday the boss thinks you're great and on Monday there's a new boss and he or she thinks you suck. So I talk about all of that. We can all relate. So I think it's a relatable book, even if you're not in radio. And I think if you like radio, you'll be interested in kind of the behind the scenes.
Well, how do you respond when you have a new boss? Because that translates to more than radio. I mean, you have someone you're working with, or maybe someone you don't like, and then all of a sudden it's a new boss. It's something that all of us have to deal with.
Yeah, you're a football player, and you could throw a football on Friday, and Monday the new coach thinks you should be on the bench, right? The way I respond to it is, and I described it in the book, because I had a couple situations like this occur, one in Las Vegas and one when I worked in Los Angeles. You can learn something from anyone. I mean, think about it. Think about our founding fathers. They had interesting personal issues, right? But they created an amazing constitution. And so you think about these things, and you just have to look at somebody and say, okay, what can I get from them that will be useful, and then ignore the things that aren't useful? Because one of the most important things in radio, and you certainly understand this, or in life in general, is you can only be who you are. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need coaching. Everybody needs coaching. You may have talent and skill and a certain ability, but you still need to listen to people around you. But if you have a boss, and I've had one, and you probably have too, who want you to be somebody you're not, you can't possibly be, you've got a problem. I had a boss one time whose his idea of what a morning show could be was very different than what I did, and he just perceived a woman being very different on the morning show. He wanted somebody like Kelly Ripa. And I said, listen, God bless Kelly Ripa. She deserves all the money she gets, but I don't do that. And I've never done that. I don't have her personality. And I remember having this conversation with him, and I was ready to leave that day. And I said, if you want Kelly Ripa, I'm not your girl. And I started to get up out of my chair because I was so sick of him beating me up and trying to make me somebody I wasn't. He didn't hire me, the previous boss had. And he was just trying to make me somebody I'm not. I don't know how to be a giggling sidekick, and that's no slam to Kelly Ripa. We're just talking about how it's usually perceived in radio. I don't know how to be a giggling sidekick. I have no idea. I've never been one. And then when I went to Los Angeles and hosted my own show, and then they put other people on with me, and then suddenly didn't want me to interrupt the boys. I'm not kidding. I've got the story in there about that. Suddenly I was interrupting the boys. I'm thinking, wait a minute, you hired me as a solo host? I don't know how to just pipe in every 5 minutes. I really don't. That wasn't what I ever did. So if your boss wants you to be somebody you can't possibly be, you are in huge trouble. I had another conversation with a boss where we sat at the table, and I'm sure you've had these same meetings. And the boss said, well, we need to do a show that appeals to everyone.
Yeah.
And yeah, right. And I slid something across his desk. I think it was a paperweight or something. And I said, see this? This isn't designed for everybody. See this? Threw another thing across the desk. This isn't designed for everybody. There's no possible way that you can do a radio show that appeals to everybody. Even if you just do news headlines, people aren't going to be happy with the way you did it, the way you presented it. It's not possible to have a product that appeals to everyone. Even Coke and Pepsi, people have their opinions, right? So you just can't do it that way. But if you have a boss who thinks you have to appeal to everybody and never, ever, rankle anyone, you're in trouble. You're in huge trouble.
Heidi Harris joining us on Idaho Insights with Kevin Miller. Don't Pat Me on the Head, her new book, Blowback, Setbacks, and Comebacks in Vegas Radio. What's the difference between talk radio and music radio?
Well, the big difference is that in talk radio, you're paid for your opinion, generally. I mean, some people just do interviews, but in general, you're paid for your opinion, and people tune in for your opinion. The interesting thing about talk radio is people tend to listen to commercials longer than they do in music radio, because in music radio, it's such a different sound that it sounds like it's interrupting what's going on. I mean, I don't know, honestly, why anybody would listen to commercial music radio when you can listen to so many other options. But with talk radio, at least there's something different, or there should be, in the host that you really like. You like his or her take on things. You're interested to see what they're going to have to say about this. You know, the kind of thing you want is for somebody to get up in the morning and say, boy, I cannot wait to hear what Kevin Miller had to say about, pick one, Stormy Daniels. Right? You want an audience who can't wait to hear what you have to say about it, and that is something that can't be replaced with music.
What do you make of Stormy Daniels?
Well, I mean, the girl's a prostitute, basically. And I'm not slamming strippers. I know people who used to be in the life. I've interviewed some people who actually try to rescue girls from that life now and bring them to Jesus. So I'm not looking down on anyone. But this is a woman who slept with a married man willingly thinking she was going to get a job and some TV show, which, by the way, what do you call that, prostitution? Yes. And now she's on television, and we're supposed to do what? Give her a round of applause?
Have you ever been scared when you've interviewed people? Because you've interviewed some people that have been high up in the organized crime for your many years on talk radio. You ever been scared when you interview people?
No, not really. It's interesting. The first person I ever interviewed, and I talk about this in the book, I was doing secretarial work, and I was taking a Dale Carnegie course, and I interviewed my boss, and I wrote all my questions down, and it was so interesting to learn about his life story. Like, for example, he and his brother were screwing around as junior high kids and tried to jump on the back of a semi-truck and almost got killed under the wheels of the truck. Interestingly, one of the brothers went on to be a United States Senator. What a crazy story, huh? I think everybody has a story if you actually ask them about it. Now, when you're interviewing people like Donald Trump, who I've interviewed a couple of times, and, you know, some of the presidential front runners over the years, or drone protesters or whatever, you interview people from all over the map. And by the way, I've got a chapter in my book about interviews. You learn to try to get something out of them, but not the gotcha stuff. You know how politicians are. You've interviewed hundreds of them, and they know how much time they have, right? And they become artful dodgers. The very first day they run for office, they know exactly how to fill the time and not say anything. So when people criticize us in talk radio, they'll say, well, you didn't make the senator answer a question. Well, good luck doing that in the Senate committee, right? They don't have any luck with that. If they don't want to answer it, they're not going to answer it. But what you can do, and what I've done over the years, is ask people philosophical questions, because they're more likely to tell you what they really think. I'll give you an example, and it's in the book. I interviewed a woman from the Gay Center in Las Vegas. She was a gay activist, and we were talking. We had a very nice conversation. I invited her on, and then I asked her a very simple question, Kevin. It's a yes or no. I said, should I be allowed as a parent to teach my child that homosexuality is wrong? And she just looked at me. And I said, well, and she said, well, you ask tough questions. It's not a tough question. It's yes or no. But when you ask somebody a philosophical question like that, then they reveal themselves. By not answering the question, she revealed that the question was not yes. The question was no, I should not have the right as a parent to teach my child about any particular value. So many times what they don't say is more insightful than what they do say.
Heidi Harris joining us. Maybe you should go into law.
I don't think I'd want to do that. But you know what? There are people who will just try to interview politicians, and they'll say, isn't it true, Senator? Like Chris Wallace from Fox News. Yes, I can't stand him. And I can listen, the guy makes more money than I do, so what do I know? But I can't stand the way he interviews. He interviews like a prosecutor. Isn't it true, Senator, that on this date you said this and that and the other? You know, the guy would be lost without his researchers. Why can't you just sit down and have a conversation and ask somebody something, how they really feel about, gun control? Okay, if we did things your way, what would happen? Actually ask them to think it through, and you'd learn a lot more about what people really think about these various issues. And we see far few of that, far less of that today than we should.
Heidi Harris joining us as we continue on here at KIDO Talk Radio. What about faith? You write in your book about faith and the obligation you have as a Christian when it comes to when it comes to producing and hosting a secular show.
Well, it is interesting because there are people who will say, well, you're not a Christian if you say this or that, or you, I can be pretty much a scrapper on social media if I need to be. Heidi Harris Show on Twitter and Heidi Harris Show on Facebook, and I can be, but I will stand up for my rights. But what I am seeing now is more and more Christians who are wusses. They just keep backing up because they don't want to criticize somebody. Meanwhile, they're taking our rights every single day. And that's what's scary. There's a woman in the UK, for example, who was recently talked to by authorities because she tweeted that a woman who was allowing her 12-year-old child to get sex change surgery was doing something wrong. In this woman's opinion, the mother was doing something wrong. And authorities investigated her. I mean, it's pretty scary. So as a Christian, I'm a bit of a scrapper on these kinds of things, as you need to be at some point. And so I think that we just need to stand up for what's right, stand up for what we believe God wants us to do. And also when it comes to my faith, I'm not going to freak out if I lose a job. I lost my last job because I stood up for family values, and I'm okay with that. I figure God's going to make sure I eat. And other people might freak out. Oh, my gosh, I lost my job. I'm nobody without a talk show. And they might lose their mind. Well, I don't, because I know that God's got it, and I didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't like they caught me in bed with a senator. And so I see a lot of people, and I wrote my book also. I've got a chapter on Kathy Griffin. and the whole situation with the Trump head, and how she continued to whine and complain about censorship and free speech and because it was clear that she put her trust in people, her trust in awards, her trust in public adulation. And there was actually an incident you may have talked about on the show a couple of years back at an award show where she got up and she said, "Suck it, Jesus, this is my award now." I mean, that's how antagonistic she was or is to Jesus. So when things happened for her, and I guess now she's selling out venues, but at the time when everything collapsed, she had nothing to fall back on. She didn't have any faith to fall back on. All she did is whine about censorship. You don't hear me whining about censorship. I was not censored when I was fired. I was just taken out of their employ, and employers have the right, should have the right, to get rid of anybody they don't believe is going to represent them correctly. And in Kathy Griffin's case, he was just whining, CNN censored me. No, they didn't censor you. They just took you off their payroll. It's a totally different thing.
Well, thank you, Heidi. More coming up with our great friend Heidi Harris. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And blessed to be a part of your day, Kevin Miller in the morning on KIDO Talk Radio. Phone number is 580-5436. 580-KIDO. Our great friend Heidi Harris joining us with Kevin Miller, Don't Pat Me on the Head, available at Amazon.com. Is this a book about radio, or is this a book about life's lessons through radio?
It's about both. So there are a couple of chapters that are totally devoted to doing radio. So even if you don't like me, even if you don't care about my life story, I think you'll find some value in the chapters on show prep and interviewing and callers and that kind of thing. And for those who are maybe think of the world as a radio as a boys' room, I have a whole chapter on being a girl in the boys' room. And it's not what you'd think. I happen to like working around mostly men, and I don't really look at it as a male-dominated industry. So I think the book is a little bit of both. I'm hoping, because a lot of people do absorb media of some kind. Most people do over the course of the day, right? Either radio or TV or something. So I think the show prep, part of it will be interesting to people. And also, how do you handle it when you realize everybody doesn't like you? And that's going to happen. There are people who aren't going to like you no matter who you are. And there are folks who fall apart. My mother, for example, can't even stand the fact that anybody would not like me. She would hate it if people didn't like her. My father-in-law, when I showed him one particular message somebody had sent me on Facebook with a lot of really nasty words in it, my father-in-law was so shook up. He couldn't believe how nasty social media is because he's a retired teacher. He didn't know, right? It's not in that world. And he was so upset by it. If I'd known it was going to upset him that much, I wouldn't have shown it to him. But you have to be able to take it. You have to be able to understand that if you believe you're right, you don't really care who doesn't think you're right. You can't worry about that because then you'll just collapse like a C-10 and be like everybody else in society.
Heidi Harris joining us as we move along. You know, somebody said this to me once, and it never really hit me until lately. What the emotional toll being in the media, particularly talk radio, does, because you know there are no segments off. It's the ultimate form of acceptance or rejection, and you can't fake it. You have to put your emotions into that. How would you respond to that? How emotionally challenging this job has been?
Yeah, I think that's true. I once interviewed Glenn Beck, and I asked him which was worse, TV or better, I should say, TV or radio. And he said radio's a lot harder because you're just throwing yourself out there. TV, you can edit and everything. But with radio, you're very honest about it. And listen, when you're on the air 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, like you've been for many, many years, you put it out there. You're very honest about your life and your feelings and things like that. And it does take an emotional toll on you. And I got to admit, I don't miss it, Kevin. Since I've been off the air, I don't miss the constant need to look at my phone every single second, keep track of what every idiot said on the Golden Globes or all of that kind of stuff. I've been focusing more, now that I'm doing a podcast, on things I actually care more about and am more interested in, and socially conservative things for the most part, but not entirely. The other day I interviewed a pain doctor about the opioid crisis, and it was fascinating. But now I have the time to do more of that and focus on the things I want to do instead of feeling like it's just a blur. And I'm sure you feel the same way. You just feel like you never get caught up. And then when you get on the air and one story flies by you that you didn't hear about, you say, well, how did I miss that? Right? And it just drives you crazy. So that part of it I don't miss at all. But I love my crew. I loved my boss. That part of it was good. But it can take an emotional toll on you because you constantly feel like you're on I don't mean on as a celebrity or a personality, but I mean you have to be mentally tuned in constantly to what's going on and very alert all the time.
Right, and if you miss something, so again, for people that are not in the media, what about the world of podcasting? How is that? We hear it's fast growing. Your review of podcasting and why people are so into it.
I think that the thing about podcasting is, you have choices about what you want to hear. There's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. There are people who will do podcasts and spend, 5 minutes saying hello to each other. If you do that, I'm out. You got to get, right, you've heard this. You got to get right into it the minute you start. Maybe some music or something, quick promo about something, and boom, right into the topic because people don't have time. The TED Talks, which are 18 minutes, they did a lot of research on those, and they decided on 18 minutes because that's how long most people want to hear something. And I try to keep my podcast to about that length, 15 to 18 minutes, because I know that when I listen to podcasts, and there are a couple I listen to, I don't have a lot of time. I'm walking the dog, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. If you're rattling on for 45 minutes, I'm out. And so you have to be aware of your audience. You have to be very conscious of the fact that you want to hold their attention. You're not going to hold their attention by saying hello to each other for 5 minutes or talking about what you did on the weekend. They don't care. They really don't care. They don't care if they don't know you, and they sure don't care even if they do know you, in my case or your case. They don't really want to hear that. So that's part of it. And I think that you can, choose certain topics. I think you have a better chance of success if you are focusing on one. If you're not a known person, like I was known in my market, so my listeners are primarily people who listen to me on commercial radio. I don't know that I've got a lot of people listening who don't really know that about me. But I would say that for the most part, if you're going to do a podcast, you need to focus on a particular topic. Let's say auto racing, woodworking. I did a podcast with a guy the other day, an interview who does nothing but interview authors. So if you have a niche, I think you have a better success. There's a girl who does one called Grammar Girl. It's a great podcast. She talks about grammar-related things. So if you do niche marketing, you'll have much better success, I think. If no one knows who you are, then if you just start out and say, oh, this is, my rant, and no one knows who I am, I don't think that's going to take off.
Heidi, can you hang on? Good morning. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Let's find out what's happening in your world. Good morning, Maggie. Heidi Harris joining us. Kevin Miller here. Don't pat me on the head. Available at Amazon.com, Blowback, Setbacks, and Comebacks in Vegas Radio. How important is your family? And we talked about your faith, but your family, particularly your husband, he's always been there by your side.
Yeah, my husband and I have been married since, actually after I started talk radio, but I knew my husband for almost 15 years before I started talk radio, so he wasn't impressed. I go out in public and people will say, oh, look, there's Heidi Harris. I come home and he's like, isn't it your turn to pick up the dog poop? I mean, this is how it is here at my house, right? It keeps it real. So you have to have somebody who supports you. Obviously, when you work morning drive, you know this better than anyone. You're constantly running on no sleep, and it's very difficult praying for that nap or whatever. So it's very difficult on the family. I don't know how anybody does it with children. I can't even imagine. I know you don't have kids. I don't have kids. I can't imagine how you could possibly find the time for everything. I really don't. But family is very important to have that family support. And to have a husband, my husband's a man of God, who's not freaking out. When I lost my job, any other man would be saying, oh, my gosh, you lost your job. What are we going to do? Huh? But he wasn't that guy because he believes that God's got a plan, and he knew that I did nothing wrong to lose my job. So what can you do at that point?
Well, how did you lose your job, and would you do it all over again?
I lost my job for posting something on social media. There was a picture that kept showing up on my local newspaper website, and it featured two men. It was for adoption, foster care, whatever. And it featured two men walking a little baby. And I got tired of seeing it because I knew that that was just promoting that as being preferable to a mom and a dad. And children need moms and dads, especially babies are easier to place in foster care or adoption. So I went online and I just said, this isn't normal. It may be normal for you. In other words, I know gay people who've always felt gay their whole life, and I can't address that because I'm just a straight person who's always been straight. But I know people who've never felt anything but gay, okay? So for them, that's normal. So I posted on there, I said, this may be normal for you, but it's not normal for children. Kids need a mom and a dad. I did not advocate that anyone take children away from gay parents. Nothing like that. I didn't advocate that gay people shouldn't be able to foster. I didn't say any of that. It doesn't matter, though, nowadays, what you say. If the gay activists come after you and they get mad because you said something, you're done. I came into work on Monday morning, And my boss said, I was on the phone with legal and corporate till 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, you know what that means, right? I'm done. And they had wanted me off the air on Monday, but he couldn't replace me. He said, I can't. I have no one to fill in for her. So they put me on Monday, and then Tuesday I went in for the meeting, and they said they were going in a different direction, which, of course, was 4 months of trying every host in America to fill my slot and finally hiring, wait for it, a gay liberal to replace me. Okay. Now, my boss wasn't freaked out about it. Now, I don't know if he even agrees with me. We never talked about it. But my boss said, you said this on the air before. And by the way, I've been very consistent about kids needing a mom and a dad, because when straight women have babies without fathers on purpose, and I've seen it happen, I posted about that on Facebook. And I've had women say to me, well, kids don't need a dad. And I've said, you're insane. That's outrageous that you would decide a kid doesn't need a father. So the point is, my position has been consistent. Children need a mom and a dad of opposite sex. Ideally, now clearly, in the real world, that's not ideal. I mean, not everybody has that situation. Everybody knows single parents can and do a great job. Nobody's questioning whether single parents can raise children. Of course they can. But it's much harder, and they're missing either the mom or the dad. And the idea that anybody would argue with that in this day and age is ridiculous.
Heidi Harris, don't pat me on the head. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Always a privilege.
KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller in the morning. We go live to Memphis, Tennessee. Tanya J. Powers joins us to cover the anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King. Tanya, good morning.
Good morning.
So this significance today and in American history.
Oh, absolutely. There have been so many events that have led up to this, this day of the commemoration. I mean, here in Memphis, they've been getting ready for this for quite some time, planning the commemoration, the tributes, the events, the symposiums, and the talks that have led up to this. It has brought a lot of extra people to Memphis, as was, everybody probably expected. Some estimates, I've seen another 100,000 people in town for this. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not more than that, honestly. The last few days, I've spent a lot of time at the National Civil Rights Museum talking to people. Also, Mason Temple, which is where he delivered his final speech, the mountaintop speech, the night before he was killed. I was over there the other day. I think Monday is when I was over there, and they've had symposiums and talks and things in events in that building, including a huge commemoration service last night, 50 years, to the evening that he delivered the mountaintop speech. Martin III, as well as I think Dr. Bernice King were there and and spoke. A really moving ceremony from what I understand. I didn't get to go to that one. There have been so many events here in town for this.
Tanya J. Powers joining us, Fox News Radio, exclusively on KIDO Talk Radio here in the Treasure Valley with Kevin Miller in the morning. When you've talked to people, for people that have seen Dr. King through the newsreels and read about him, how relevant is his message today and his place in our history when we think about what he faced? And today everybody is polarized. Everybody is sometimes offended. Yet Dr. King had such a unique, special way of dealing with, some would say, overwhelming obstacles and succeeded.
He did. He did face overwhelming obstacles. I mean, he was jailed. I mean, matter of fact, I think to kind of answer that question, I asked some folks here in Memphis, what do you think about the as far as the activism and the protests and the marches and things like that we saw in the 60s, and we've seen kind of a resurgence of in the last few years, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement and March for Our Lives more recently. It's that same kind of nonviolent protest sort of spirit that has sort of come back with all of this. And one of the people I interviewed is an activist who was actually instrumental in the removal of a couple of the Confederate statues here in the last few months. And she told me, she said she remembered his Dr. King's words in the letter from a Birmingham jail. And he talks about, kind of to paraphrase it, it's sort of, if you're tied up in what you don't like the delivery of the message, like the marches or the protests or the sign carrying and all of that. He said, then you're missing the point of the need for the message in the first place, which I think if you go back and you look at the deeper meaning of some of his works and his words, there's a lot more to what he said than just the I Have a Dream speech or the things that we most know him for.
Let's go to what it means to the people of Memphis, as we've discussed. And for people that don't know, you are from that area, you've worked that area. What does it mean to people that are Memphis natives, not only today but every day?
I think, it's one of those things that if you live here and especially if you grow up in this area, you hear about it your entire life. It's one thing to hear about it and learn about it in historical context. It's another entirely different thing to see the fact that, there are a lot of concerns that are still the same in Memphis, and this is not the only city, but since it happened here, it's relevant. The poverty that he was trying to do something about and call attention to back then, you still got the same kind of, poverty problems here today. There's still segregation. It's not, government mandated segregation, but there is still, that especially as far as in the schools goes. I'm not trying to paint a bleak picture. That's not it at all. There's a lot of great things happening in the city, and it's taken this long to sort of get people sort of moving in the right direction as far as working together across racial lines, which is a good thing to see. There's a lot of that's really sprung up in the last probably 10 years.
Tanya J. Powers with us, Fox News Radio, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. One final thought. When you go to the National Civil Rights Museum, when you see that hotel where you see where Dr. King was when he was killed, where he was assassinated, where James Earl Ray fired that shot, what is the feeling there? Can you take us to that spot that is still there today?
Yeah, I can do that, because when you go through the museum, you see the exhibits and you see the replica of the bus that, Rosa Parks sat on, and you hear the recording of the driver who's saying, please move to the back of the bus, and just over and over and over. And it's really moving. The rooms that Dr. King stayed in, for his final hours. I was actually able at one point several years ago to walk out on the balcony. The general public is not allowed on the balcony for obvious reasons, because it would, it probably wouldn't remain there very long if it had that much foot traffic on it all the time. But I was actually able to go out there once and stand there on it. And, you kind of stand there and you look across. You can't help but look across at the other building where the shot was fired from. And it's just one of the most surreal things to stand there and know you're literally standing where history happened, and that, in some ways fractured things, and made all kinds of history and events changed for the rest of our existence. It's a really moving place to be. If you ever get the chance, go through the museum and learn about the civil rights movement and the tribute to Dr. King.
Tanya J. Powers, we appreciate your on-the-scene reporting. Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
All right, Tanya J. Powers joining us here at KIDO Talk Radio. Right. Thank you very much, Larry. It is currently 45 in Star. Kevin Miller in the morning, reminding you Russ Fulcher will join us in studio. In addition to that, we'll take a look at, whether or not we should be sending troops to the border to stop the caravan. We'll have the latest from Fox News on your home for Fox News on the radio. That is KIDO Talk Radio. And don't forget, coming up Thursday, we're at Mountain View High School, promoting our schools, securing our future. Good morning.